Everything Everywhere says, hey, what's the best way to create a flashcard? Is it by typing in a sentence on the front side of the card with your native language and a translation in your target language on the back side? So it depends. There are a lot of different ways to do flashcards. And you just have to, be aware that flashcards aren't necessarily the best way to learn words. I'm not saying you shouldn't use them. They can be very powerful for remembering things, absolutely. But they're not necessarily the best way to learn. Because if you, for example, learn a phrase and you remember it and you know exactly what it means, do you know how to use it, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, making flashcards. If you find the process of making the flashcard useful in actually learning, then yeah, it makes sense to build them by yourself. Now, let's say it's an idiom, right? So if it's an idiom, you might want to put the idiom on the front, and then on the back, you could put a couple different things. You could put what it means, or you could put an example that tells you what it is. Now, if you want to write it in your language, you could, but I wouldn't recommend that. For idioms, I would stay away from your language. I would do a description of the meaning on the back or an example that shows the meaning on the back. You could do either way, but I would recommend doing it with only one language if you can, because that's going to push you to improve faster. Now, the most accepted or widely used version of flashcards is something called spaced repetition. So spaced repetition is the idea that at a certain rate, you repeat cards. So for that reason, it's probably better to do digital cards or use an app that does spaced repetition than doing actual physical flashcards. Because with actual physical flashcards, your mind might get used to the pattern, and that might be the thing that's helping you remember it. But if you use spaced repetition, it spreads it out so that as you start to forget it the first time, then it will bring it up. And then there's a shorter period of time for the second repetition, and then it gets longer and longer and longer until you know it. So they have it spaced out exactly at the right, it's called intervals with spaced repetition, and that sort of tricks your mind into grabbing onto it so that you can keep it long term. The one that's really popular is called Anki. So Anki is a flashcard system for a lot of different things, and medical students use it, and a lot of people use Anki. So I would recommend checking that out, but I would suggest maybe staying away from the physical cards. That's kind of an outdated method unless you have a really good way to make sure that the spacing is right, to make sure that you're able to see it at the right time to improve or maximize your ability to remember it. So that's good and fine, but just keep in mind that really what you're trying to do is learn something that you can use, right? So I think the most powerful way to learn a word or a phrase or an idiom is to make sentences with it. Once you learn it, you know what it means, you've seen it in a couple other examples, make your own examples, write your own down. And if you do that, you're more likely to remember it more quickly. If it's just recall, right, that's great. You know it, you remembered it, but can you use it? Language exists to be used, to interact with other human beings, and so the best way to learn it is to use it. So I would strongly encourage you to consider not only flashcards, and maybe not flashcards at all, but some other way that involves a usage of the word, usage of the idiom instead. Or do both if you want to use flashcards. Anki is pretty well known as a good way to do spaced repetitions. So that's it for that, if you have any other questions about that, let me know. There's another app. What's it called? I use one for other things. What's it called? I can't remember what it's called. There's another app that I can't remember the name of right now, but if you look it up in the App Store, you should be able to just search flashcards and you can find it in your App Store based on popularity. I think it's another spaced repetition one. So if you have any other questions, let me know. If you guys haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please check out the full courses in the links in the description. Some of the courses cover idioms, for example. So if you're interested in learning idioms, that would be a good, or rather those 4 courses would be good to check out because they cover the context of an idiom, not just the meaning, right? I talk about in each one, it's the same format. So first we talk about the pronunciation, then we talk about the basic meaning, then we go into examples. How is this actually used? So I mean it as a powerful way to actually learn, and then I encourage you to make your own examples for each one. And it's over 200 idioms for all those courses combined. All right.